You are listening to the Tricorder Transmissions Special Episode 25. And now, here are Craig and Jeff.
Hey everybody, welcome to the first part of our Season 3 wrap-up episodes. This is here on the Tricorder Transmissions. We are your hosts, Jeff Hewlett.
And Craig Cohen.
And with us is our constantly returning third chair on these episodes, Mr. Chris Ritzer. How's it going, Chris?
Doing good. Hello, everybody.
Hey, it's good to see you on the show again, Chris. It's been a little while.
Yeah, been a bit. Good to be back.
Yeah, it's always good to have you. And we also have with us in spirit is Mr. Mat Wolski has sent in his comments on each episode and what his essential votes are. So we'll be reading off some of his input. Thank you, Matt, as always, for sending in your comments. And I guess we will just jump right in with the first broadcast episode of the third season, and that would be Spocks Brain. Craig, do you have a synopsis for us?
Yes, from the NBC press release issued on August 16th, 1968. A beautiful woman's ghostly image startles the officers and crew on the bridge of the USS Enterprise. But its disappearance brings the discovery that Mr. Spock's brain has been removed with surgical perfection in the premiere episode of Star Trek, beginning its third season of Colorcast on the NBC television network.
Very cool synopsis. And our essential votes are split on this one. Craig, you voted essential, and you said it was because of your famous cocktail party rule. The worst episode of the series must be seen, and you also cited some character moments for Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. I voted non-essential. My reasoning was no new alien races. Character moments were nothing new, and the social commentary of the episode itself was really not enough to throw it over the edge for me. So, do you have any follow-up on your vote, Craig?
Yeah, this is the time where you're going to change your vote to essential, right?
No, I don't think so.
I got to say, overall, I don't really have anything to add in terms of my feelings on this episode. But I will speak a little to the third season in general and sort of what I appreciate about the third season now that we're done with it. And arguably, or not arguably, it is the worst of the three seasons. But I think the thing that I like about the third season is how unique it is. And having the option to watch some episodes that are a little different than you'd expect from Star Trek, I think is what makes this series special. And the original series wouldn't be the original series without season 3.
I agree with that. It's a very good way of looking at it. And I think for me, I always look at the third season with that age-old rule of mine that no matter how bad the episodes may be, it's really nice to spend time with the characters that you love. So even if the scripts aren't as good or the production value is not as good, it's always cool to see Kirk, Spock, and McCoy and the rest of the crew on an adventure. So, Chris Ritzer, how do you fall on Spock's Brain?
I'm really torn on this one. While it's considered like the worst episode, I guess you could almost give an essential vote for that, but I'm gonna have to go non-essential on this one. I mean, it's not as bad as a lot of people think. I think it's actually halfway decent. It's kind of fun, I think, more than anything. But non-essential. There's bigger cocktail episodes out there.
I agree with that. I agree with your.
And they're coming too, so
they are coming. I agree with you that it's not as bad as people say. I definitely don't think Spock's Brain is the worst episode of the entire series. What do you think, Craig?
No, and we've talked about this a little bit. I cannot call any episode of Star Trek the worst of the series if it doesn't bore me. And Spock's Brain, like Chris said, it's not a boring episode. I'm more offended by boring Star Trek episodes than bad Star Trek episodes.
Makes total sense to me. So, Mat Wolski, he has quite a long write-up here. I'm going to skim through it for everybody. And he feels that Spock's Brain is essential. He cites the cocktail party rules that you said, and general reviews, this is often quoted as the worst episode of Star Trek, although he doesn't feel that it is. Gene L. Kuhn, in his opinion, was the finest writer on Star Trek, and he wrote this one under the pseudonym, of course, and a lighthearted jab at the studio, so he likes that. He can go on about the problems, Spock not losing his hair, of course, and being able to talk to McCoy while he's having the brain operation. There's a lot of stuff. The zombie Spock being remote controlled around, continuity problems. So there's a lot of issues, but he says there's also plenty to recommend. Show looks gorgeous despite the slash budgets. You see Kirk interacting in front of the active view screen again, rare shot. Planet sets, background, underground chamber sets, gorgeous looking women in miniskirts, and the immortal Brain and Brain, what is Brain line. So supporting cast all get something to do. So, and it's also been spoofed in other television shows like the Wonder Years. So fantastic. So the great input from Matt. So that's 2 essentials, one from Craig, one from Matt, and 2 non-essentials. So we're still bitterly divided on this one.
Yeah, and I got to say, Matt, thank you for those comments, and I want to hear the Mat Wolski Star Trek podcast.
Yeah, we got to coach him through getting his Skype working, because he's been having issues with that for a year now.
I would love to listen to him riff on Star Trek. That's a podcast I would listen to every week.
Yeah, me too. Matt, consider that a challenge. We need the Mat Wolski TOS podcast. So, all right. So next up is the Enterprise incident, and on that episode we had one of our favorite guests, Vernon Wilmer, guest starring. So if you haven't listened to that, go back and check it out. Vernon's got some really cool stuff to say. And Craig Cohen, do you have our synopsis?
Yes, the NBC press release reads, Captain Kirk disguises himself as a Vulcan Romulan in an attempt to free the USS Enterprise, which is being held captive while Mr. Spock is prisoner to the charms of a female Romulan commander on NBC Television Network's Star Trek in Color, Friday, September 27th.
So this was pretty much, in my opinion, a no-brainer essential episode. We both voted essential on this one. A whole litany of reasons why. We both shared most of them. Spock's 18-year history in Starfleet gives us a little timestamp on Spock's career. Romulan and Klingon sharing ship designs. The Vulcan sexual ritual, which we see in the future. Spock's character moments, playing the romantic angle on the Romulan commander, and some Scotty character moments. So anything to add to that, Craig?
It is definitely a boss of an episode that really would stand with or would fit in at the peak of the series, wherever you consider that peak to be.
Well said. Chris, what do you think?
That just about sums it up perfectly. What both you guys said, it's definitely essential, and it's one of my favorites of the 3rd season. It's a great episode, and yeah, you can put it up against just about any of the good episodes in the first 2 seasons.
That's a good point. I didn't even think about stacking it up against episodes from the first 2 seasons. And I think it's safe to say that whenever the Romulans show up, it's going to be essential. So always great to see them. And a kind of an underused villain in the original series, I think.
Oh, totally. And I think one of the main things we should point out about this episode, at least in terms of why it might seem so strong, is it was written by D.C. Fontana.
Ah, yes. Good point. Good point. And Chris, being an expert on all things Star Trek in general, but having read a lot and seen every episode of every series, you have a lot more knowledge about the Romulans post TOS. So very important, their introduction in the original series and to the future use of the Romulans, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah, they keep coming back time and time again. And so it's nice. You have to get into their heads a little bit here and into their culture. And it sets up everything in the future nicely.
Yeah, I think they were even part of a Next Generation season-ending cliffhanger at one point, weren't they?
Yes, that's right. I believe. And then I think the first season, it's either the last episode or the second to last episode when they come back. Yeah, that was a pretty good episode.
And they show up and it's like, hey, guys, just let you know we're back.
Yeah.
And we'll show up again at some point. All right, so Mat Wolski has a couple things to say about this. He also feels this is essential, so we've got 4 essential votes for this. There's no arguments here. His favorite of the 2 Romulan shows, Shatner is wonderful to watch when playing Playing Mad, the Vulcan death grip is introduced. Oh, it doesn't exist, but people always mention it and confuse it with the nerve pinch. Klingon cruisers are seen. Interesting, the Romulans are using Klingon design. We mentioned that as being essential reasoning. Their alliance has been mentioned tons of times in the books and comics, but not adequately explained on the show. So it's probably confusing in 68, as he says. He likes the spy espionage story, and he thinks it wouldn't have been an out of place story on something like Mission Impossible. So pretty cool equation to another show. And the Enterprise escapes without firing a shot, which is something I don't think we really talked about. So pretty cool.
Yeah, and the Mission Impossible connection is really, really good, Matt, in the sense that they had a master of disguise on that show.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Very cool connection that I will always make now when I watch that episode.
Oh, great. So thanks a lot for that, Matt. And with that, we will move on to the Paradise Syndrome. Craig, you're up.
All right. From the NBC press release, Captain Kirk is wed on Star Trek. An asteroid hurtles towards the planet on which Captain Kirk has married a beautiful member of a tribe oblivious to their impending doom in the Star Trek Colorcast on the NBC television network Friday, October 4th.
All right. So, double essential. This episode is remembered fondly for being a shot outdoors on location. So, you voted it essential because of the Vulcan physiology. The ship functionality that we're introduced to. I voted essential because Kirk fathers a child, which is a relatively significant life event. The Preservers as a race are kind of referred to in a TNG episode called The Chase. They are an ancient race of humanoids who are responsible for the origin of the human race. So I think a lot of things to like about this episode. I know it's viewed as kind of silly, the whole Kirok thing, but both of us felt that it was essential. And Chris, how do you feel about this episode?
Oh, I like this episode a lot. It's a fun episode to watch, but I'm going to go non-essential on this one.
Oh, why is that?
Actually, you almost convinced me otherwise, but I just don't think that's quite enough to make it essential. It's, yeah, you get some good moments here and there, but the whole baby thing, that's kind of thrown out the window and never brought up again or nothing like that. It's almost like it never happened, and this whole thing like kind of went up in smoke. So it's a good episode. It's a lot of fun, but for me, it just there's not enough there to deem it essential.
So will you at least agree, Chris, that it's really fun to say Miramani?
Yes.
Well, here's a question. So, you mentioned that the baby thing is never brought up again. So, does it say more about Kirk as a character that he never mentioned it again and he internalized it, or would it say more if he did say it again? Talk about it later.
No, it's less to do with that and more just I think it was done for shock value, and I think it was just lazy writing.
Okay, understood. Mat Wolski votes this episode essential. Kirk setting up a new life away from the ship, gets married, has an unborn child, and the location shots he mentions are gorgeous. And the idea of an asteroid deflector is nice. He likes that idea that there's an apparatus on the planet that can deflect incoming asteroids. So if he says if he was more cynical, he would have problems with the American Indian setting, but he feels that it was explained away nicely. And also cite some Spock and McCoy moments, which we didn't really talk about in our essential voting, but there were some really good Spock and McCoy moments on the ship as they were discussing, what the priority should be, going back to get Kirk versus saving the planet from the asteroid, and Spock wasting time on this and that and the other thing. So good call there, Matt. We should have mentioned that in our essential votes. So do either one of you guys have anything to follow up with?
No, I do know that you mentioned it earlier in our discussion here, but any episode where they're out on at a practical location, especially one that's outside, is just so great to see. I mean, it really opens up the scope of this show, and especially in season 3 when their budget was so limited, to have those on location shoots really adds a lot to the look of the show.
I agree. I really enjoy watching this one for those outdoor shots as well. It kind of throws me back to the old Vasquez rock sets that we used to see in prior episodes. But always nice to see the crew on an actual outside set and not an indoor mocked up outdoor set. So let's see. Next up is The Infamous and the Children Shall Lead, featuring Melvin Belli. So how about that synopsis, Craig?
Do I have to?
Yeah, for the sake of the format, yeah.
NBC press release issued September 10th, 1968. Children appearing unconcerned at the death of their parents are beamed aboard the USS Enterprise and begin taking over the minds of the crew as Captain Kirk, Mr. Spock, and Dr. McCoy attempt to battle an unseen force on NBC TV's Star Trek episode And the Children Shall Lead, Friday, October 11th.
Yep, another pretty much no-brainer. It's a double non-essential vote. Craig, you said the debut of the United Federation of Planets flag almost tipped it for you. And I said no character moments, no recurring aliens, and no new technology introductions. So anything to expand on, Craig?
Reading the synopsis of that episode, it sounds so darn exciting on paper.
It does, doesn't it?
But I really think that this is an episode, when you talk about least favorite episodes of the series, this is one I am not anxious to ever watch again.
I agree. It's one of the ones that doesn't make my regular rotation. So, Chris Ritzer, what about you?
This is the worst episode of the series. I think it's worse than Miri, and
Wow.
This is really, really just bad television.
Worse than Alternative Factor?
Yes.
Whoa, that's saying a lot.
At least Alternative Factor is so bad that it's almost good. It just, you laugh your ass off at it. This year, it's just, I wanted to strangle every single one of those kids. I hate the episode. It's horrible.
Wow.
Next.
All right. Whoa. Chris is moving the show on, but not before we read off some of Matt's comments. So Matt also agrees that it's non-essential. So it looks like that's a four-way agreement. Trek and kids don't often mix well, in his opinion, and he acknowledges that it's voted at the bottom of the list for most viewers, but he still likes the episode because the supporting characters get some good scenes. He likes the illusions on the view screen and Uhura getting old, the makeup they use. Chekhov gets to hold Kirk at a phaser point, so that he likes that. Shatner's acting in the cave when he has the panic attack, he really likes, but is unintentionally hilarious. He likes how Spock reassures him that he's still in command. And he also likes the scene where Kirk orders Mr. Leslie and he keeps getting things jumbled up. So he actually defends Melvin Belli as Gorgon a little bit. He feels it's not as bad as people would have you believe. I don't know if I can agree with that.
Maybe if you're grading it on like the Ed Wood scale.
Yeah, that's a good call.
Sorry, Matt.
No, it's okay. Hey, this is the great thing about Trek, is that we can all disagree and find different things to disagree with, even though we all kind of agree on the episode itself. It's good that somebody can look and find some good things to say about it. So that about wraps it up for this one. I don't think we need to give this one any more time. So let's move on to Is There in Truth No Beauty? Craig Cohen, you are up.
All right, the NBC press release, September 17th, 1968. Mr. Spock, after gazing upon a Mendusan, will die of madness unless Captain Kirk can persuade a woman already jealous of Spock's mental powers to save him by performing a dangerous mind link, on NBC Television Network's Star Trek, Friday, October 18th.
So the essential voting on this episode was quite interesting, Craig, because you've changed your vote based on my explanation for my essential vote. So it is a double essential.
Awesome. Cool.
So I had said that this episode explores a lot about the Vulcan ways and their mind powers. And there's a new power introduced where two minds can be joined and act through each other, as well as we learn that a non-Vulcan can be taught to use Vulcan abilities. So Vulcans themselves aren't necessarily the sources of the power. That technique can be taught to other races. So a very interesting explanation of some of the background on the Vulcan ways and the Vulcan powers. So Chris Ritzer, how do you feel about this episode and the fact that Vulcan powers can be taught to humans?
I agree with your reasoning. Essential for this one. It's cool to see more Vulcan superpowers brought up and expanded upon. It's also really cool too to see Diana Muldaur come back.
Yes.
Who will eventually play Dr. Pulaski in season 2 of Next Generation.
Yes, Mat Wolski actually points that out in his synopsis as well. He likes the fact that Diana Muldaur is back in this one. He also agrees this is essential. He's got a lot of things in here. He likes the camera angles from the point of view of Marvick and Spock when they go insane. And he likes that Spock gets to emote. So I know he's a big fan of seeing Spock becoming emotional. I think all of us like to see those emotional outbursts from Spock. And he likes the scene where Spock gets sad about how lonely human beings are. So shots of the Enterprise in the void are nice. And the mind meld battle at the end is very nicely shot and edited. And he thinks it's one of the more stylishly directed episodes. So, and it also mentions the IDIC for the first time, which that was the piece of merchandise I think that Gene Roddenberry wanted to market. So I think that was a contentious thing for the actors in the episode, especially Leonard Nimoy. So, all right. So everybody agrees that this is an essential episode. So any closing thoughts from either the two of you before we move on?
No, just it's very cool to see that we're able to change our opinion on something based on the argument of the other. I'm hoping that happens during the course of this discussion. So we'll see.
Ah, very good. So
it will.
Oh. Oh, on that note, so next up is Spectre of the Gun, Craig Cohen.
From TV Guide, October 19th, 1968. An eerie punishment awaits the men of the Enterprise. For violating Melkoshian space, they are made to appear as the Clanton Gang in Tombstone, Arizona on October 26, 1881. If history is correct, they will be met and killed by the Earps and Doc Holliday at the OK Corral. Stylized see-through sets and the lawman's funeral black costumes heighten the dreamlike aura of this episode.
So, double non-essential. Craig specifically says it does not fall under the cocktail party rule, in his opinion. I said there are, no new aliens, no new tech, and not many memorable character moments that would push it over the edge. We both agreed that we liked the stylization of the episode. It definitely makes it special, but wasn't enough to push it over the essential edge for either one of us. So, Chris Ritzer, where do you fall on Spectre of the Gun?
Non-essential.
Okay, that was easy.
Yes. Yes, there's nothing new happening here. It's actually kind of like a regurgitated storyline to where the Enterprise crew is being tested to see how moral they are by a superior race. It's been done before, and
it will be done again.
Exactly. So, yeah, non-essential.
Well, guess what, guys? Mat Wolski disagrees with all three of us and calls this episode essential. And also adds to that it is easily in his top 5 episodes.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a shocker, huh? So he goes on to say that he loves Westerns anyway, so he was never going to have anything less than 100% affection for this episode. He loves the stylization of the sparse buildings in the Wild West town, and he loves the red backdrop, so it makes it very eerie. Probably wouldn't have been half as effective if it had been filmed on a proper Western backlot. That's a really good point. The episode probably wouldn't have come off the same way if they had actually filmed it in a real proper backlot or even on a location somewhere. So that's a good point, Matt. Thanks for pointing that one out. He likes the fact that the Earps are really eerie and soulless and are almost like phantoms throughout the episode, which is true. They do give them kind of a phantom-like or ghost-like feeling, the way they act and the way they just kind of appear. Rex Holman, who plays Morgan Earp, comes back nearly 20 years later in Star Trek V as the bald guy that Sybok mesmerizes at the start, which that's a good point, too. I think we mentioned that during the show. And he loves the mind meld scenes at the end and the gunfight. So that was one of the things that, to me, was one of the standout moments of this episode, was where Spock could use the mind meld to make the other Enterprise crew members not afraid. I like the fact that he could implant that in their minds and affect their behavior without actually having the direct mind meld on them the entire time. So that's kind of a cool little expose there. What do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I didn't even think about that, but yeah, it's not enough to make it essential, I don't think.
Well, you also wonder if that was just a power that was created as a way as a plot convenience.
True.
Yeah.
True. Many of them probably were, but yeah, great observation though. Kind of a fun thing, and of course, it is a very different episode. Like the Empath, it's a very different episode in the way that it's filmed and the way that it was set up. So, that makes it worth watching, even though it is a non-essential episode. So, all right. So next up is the Day of the Dove. Craig Cohen.
All right, the NBC press release issued on October 2nd, 1968. Mysterious hatred runs rampant aboard the USS Enterprise as Captain Kirk, Mr. Spock, and Dr. McCoy battle Klingons led by Kang on the NBC television network Star Trek Friday, November 1st.
Yeah, well, there's a whole slew of things that make this episode essential. It was a double essential, of course, and the list of reasons reads: the first and only female Klingon in the original series, first use of intra-ship beaming, the size of the crew complement of a Klingon ship is stated to be 440 members, Enterprise officers' quarters are located on Deck 6 of the ship, manual control area on the Enterprise and the Jeffries tube are put into play here. The Klingons have a portable torture device, and of course, the introduction of the iconic Kang character. Chris, I know you're a big fan of Kang.
Oh, yes. Michael Ansara is an awesome Klingon. And I was very happy when he came back in Deep Space Nine with Kor and Koloth. Yeah, this is a really fun episode. Yeah, definitely essential. And yeah, it's cool. Yeah, you get to see a female Klingon for the first time. And the only negative, I think, is the whole conclusion to the story.
I knew you were going to go there
with the whole laugh attack, but otherwise, it's a cool episode. Yeah, and Klingons are always fun.
So this is the first and maybe the only time they use ridicule as a weapon on Star Trek.
Yeah.
So, Craig Cohen, any other thoughts on Day of the Dove before we move on to Matt's comments?
No, actually, I think Chris and yourself and your notes covered it pretty well.
All right. So, no brainer, of course. Matt calls this episode essential as well. A lot of the same reasons. Klingons and humans make a truce, so that's pretty cool to get out of a situation, which shows that they can overcome their differences. And he felt that's a very important message for Star Trek to send out. And he also agrees with Chris that Michael Ansara is an awesome Klingon. Let's see. So they have he also points out that they have their kind of oily look back after season 2, where they look more normal. There's plenty of great sword fighting at the end. Pretty cool. And you get to see Sulu in a Jeffries tube. So that's pretty cool. And that's there's a lot of other little things here, but he brings up some parallels to other episodes, like the evil cloud is the cousin of the Reject alien from Wolf in the Fold that kind of feeds off the negative emotions and or Reject feed off of fear and controlled people and manipulated them into doing his bidding. So kind of a similar alien. So pretty cool wrap up from Matt. Any thoughts on Matt's comments, you guys?
Matt always provides great, well thought out, detailed, insightful comments. So, Matt, they are appreciated.
All right. Are we ready to move on to the next episode?
Yes.
All right. So, next up is For the World is Hollow, and I Have Touched the Sky.
All right, from the NBC press release, a hollow world, in reality a spaceship camouflaged as an asteroid, hurtles towards disaster as Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock helplessly watch a dying Dr. McCoy submit to electronic enslavement on NBC television network Star Trek Friday, November 8th.
All right, and this was a double non-essential from both Craig and I, and I think we felt that the McCoy heavy episode didn't really have enough to put it over the top. I'm not sure. There weren't any new aliens really that recurred later on. No new tech to speak of here. So, Chris, do you have any information that you think would make this episode essential for us?
Nah, I agree. Non-essential. It's sort of, I guess, just a new take on the whole supercomputer kind of story. I mean, it's an all right episode, but there's nothing to make it essential at all.
Okay, Craig, any interest in changing your vote on this one?
No interest in changing my vote, but this is another episode where I think the press release did a better job than the episode did.
Good point. Good point. So once again, Matt disagrees with us, calls this episode essential. He says essential from a McCoy standpoint. He said it's McCoy's turn to get married, and he has some lovely scenes with Kirk and Spock. The relationship between the big three is incredibly tight in this episode, as it is in the Empath. McCoy getting cured and leaving the tear at the end is predictable and problematic of a 50-minute one-off story, so the ending's a bit anticlimactic for him. But if you want vintage DeForest Kelley, then this is his show. So interesting comments from Matt. Any reflections on that from you two?
No.
So Matt wraps it up nicely. Okay. All right. So we are going to move on to what I think is going to be one of the more contentious discussions of this episode, and that is the Tholian web. Craig Cohen.
All right, from the NBC press release issued on October 21st, 1968, Mr. Spock and Dr. McCoy attempt to locate Captain Kirk's body, which fades in and out of view in space while the Enterprise is gradually engulfed in a trap in the Tholian web on NBC television network Star Trek Colorcast of Friday, November 15th.
All right, I voted essential on this episode. So the introduction of the Tholians, who show up in every series with the exception of Voyager. And this episode, the Tholian Web, also serves as a prequel for an Enterprise story arc later on that involves the Mirror Universe in the Enterprise series. And very controversially, Mr. Craig Cohen voted non-essential on this one.
Yeah, I'm shocked at myself looking at that vote. I'm not sure what my reasoning was. It might have been, and without having gone back and listened to the episode or looking at my notes, I think I might have not considered the Tholians that important, considering that this is really original series focused, and they don't pop up in that universe again, in terms of they don't pop up in the movies. But thinking back now, this is one that I think I might have to change my vote on, just because it's such an important episode, at least in keeping season 3, or at least in the case that it's one of season 3's strongest episodes. So I don't know. I think I'm going to change my vote to essential.
Oh, excellent. I'm glad you did that before we gave Chris Ritzer his chance to talk, because I think he was waiting to jump down your throat on this one.
Craig, that's what I wanted to hear. Thank you.
I'm glad I was able to help you out there.
Yeah, this is definitely an essential episode. Yeah, brand new alien race who they pop back up in Enterprise, and they're, for just the original series, they're, even though they only popped up once, a lot like the Gorn, they're pretty much considered a classic villain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is a cool episode. You get to see. I like when they think Kirk is dead and they get his last order log, and he tells them to both, "Yeah, I'm sure you're arguing all that, yada yada." And then they mess with him at the end, like, "Oh yeah, we never read any of that, never got to it." And he's kind of like, oh, "Okay."
Yeah, the Kirk mind game they play. It's great.
Yeah, yeah. This is a really good episode, and yes, essential.
All right. Well, Mr. Mat Wolski agrees with us. Amazing effects, an ensemble episode. Tholians and their web are excellently realized. Kirk is absent for most of the show, which is extremely rare. Spacesuits make their debut and are a huge improvement over the orange shower curtains from the Naked Time. I agree with that. McCoy and Spock have great moments again. You get to see Kirk's final message and orders, which is touching. And, of course, something you will never see again. So Escape from the Web is a bit anticlimactic for him, but overall he feels it's a very strong show. Excellent comments from Matt. So any reflections on those from you guys?
No, again, good job, Matt.
Sounds good.
All right. So we will move on from the Tholian web to the following episode, Plato's Stepchildren. This is a big one. Craig.
NBC press release dated October 28th, 1968. Kirk, Spock, and McCoy respond to a distress call on Platonius and become slaves to the will of the inhabitants in Plato's Stepchildren on NBC television network Star Trek, Friday, November 22nd.
So we have a split vote on this episode, with Craig falling on the essential side, citing the famous cocktail party rule. And I guess we all really know why that is. It's that first interracial kiss on television. So that's a huge historic moment. And I went non-essential for this episode. I did give it an honorable mention tag for the historical aspect, but I didn't feel that there was enough in the show to tip it over and make it essential watching as far as the Trek universe is concerned. So there's nothing new revealed on the show, no new aliens that recur, no new technology. It was just the cultural aspect of this episode that really had the punch. So Chris, what are your thoughts on the essential nature of Plato's Stepchildren?
Yeah, this is one I'm really split on. Yeah, you have the cultural significance, but the episode itself, I don't think is very good. I don't care for it at all, really. And I guess non-essential on this one.
Interesting. So Mat Wolski also calls this non-essential. He really struggles with this one. There are parts that he really likes, such as any scene with Alexander. So the Alexander was very good in this episode.
Michael Dunn, a great, one of the great Star Trek performances.
Spectacular. I agree. And he likes where Kirk is telling them that where he comes from, there's no worry about race, color, size. That's a great expose on the future of Earth. The interracial kiss is important, but their lips touch in the loosest sense of the word, but it's hardly a smacker. Things that are cringeworthy, Spock singing and Kirk acting like a horse. So on paper, it's a Blish adaptation. It reads very well, but I don't think it's executed very well. So at least he says there's one cool scene of Spock in depression having been overloaded with emotions. That was a pretty cool scene.
Mm-hmm. And I think Matt hit on something that we sort of have probably danced around a little bit in our coverage this season, and even alluded to during this discussion when we said, some of the press releases read better than the episode. And I think a lot of these episodes, if they had hit, the desk on season 1 or season 2 and had gotten a couple of more passes and possibly, some rewrites from, some of the more experienced writers on the staff, that you would have gotten a much better final product.
That's a really good point. And I think that you're really onto something, because there's if you look at the way a lot of these episodes were written in the third season, they weren't given the care and the rewrites necessarily that the episodes in the first 2 seasons were. So we will always wonder, I guess, what some of these episodes could have been had they been given that treatment that they were given in the first 2 seasons. Chris, what do you think about that?
Oh, certainly. Yeah, this is definitely one of those episodes that could have used another pass or two with a writer. Actually, a lot of third season episodes are like that. They definitely could have been tightened up, but that is what it is.
Yeah, I think that's really probably the strongest indication that, or the biggest thing that was lost when Gene Kuhn left the show and was replaced by Fred Freiberger, is, you really see what Gene L. Kuhn brought to this, brought to the table.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, that's true.
Absolutely. So moving on, the next episode up is Wink of an Eye.
From the NBC press release, Captain Kirk discovers that the Enterprise and its crew are captives of a dying people who move with the speed of light and intend to use the crewmen to help repopulate their planet, Scalos, in Wink of an Eye on NBC television network Star Trek, Friday, November 29th.
All right, double non-essential from Craig and I on this one. The Scalosians, although cool, do not recur at all. Once they're kind of a one and done. No new technology really to speak of. Some cool scientific work by Spock and McCoy to figure out how to change speeds and catch up to Kirk and help Kirk get back. That's kind of cool, but wasn't enough to put it over the edge of essential. Craig, any interest in changing your vote or perspective on this?
No, but this is an episode again that I think the concept of this episode is really, really cool, and I'm not sure that any additional workshopping of this script would make it an essential episode or even a better episode. But I mean, when Star Trek is able to play, or the fact that Star Trek was able to play with such high concept ideas, like the ones we see in Wink of an Eye, that's what really makes the series special for me.
I agree with that. It's a really fun episode to watch. I find it really enjoyable that it kind of puts the premise out there that there can be people who move so quickly that we can't see them, and they can affect our lives and change things around, in our reality. So it's almost a different plane of existence, but it actually really is the same plane of existence. Chris, what do you think about Wink of an Eye?
It's non-essential, but it's pretty much quintessential Star Trek. I mean, this is a really good, just Star Trek story, and it's a lot of fun, like Craig was saying. It's a cool episode. It's not essential, but yeah, it's definitely one I like to watch.
All right, Mat Wolski calls this an essential episode. Says he hated it the first time he saw it, but over the years he's come to love it. Lots of problems with the science, particularly the continuity, but the interplay between Kirk and Deela makes it entertaining. So strongly implied that Kirk has sex in this episode. You see him retiring to his cabin, and then he's putting on his boots. I think Craig has cited this as evidence that Kirk has had sex in an episode. Although we've had this argument for a while now that I say that there's only evidence of Kirk actually having sex one time, and that's when he fathered the child. The other times could have just been makeout sessions that we don't necessarily know.
That kid's never born, though, right?
No, he's never born, but she's pregnant. So I mean, obviously he had sex with her.
Was she
messing around? She was getting with the other medicine guy or whatever. I think there was a little bit of side action going on there.
You're digging. You're digging. So, oh man. So nothing ground shattering, but it'll find affection with certain Trek fans depending on their disposition. But it's okay by Matt. So Matt disagrees with all of us and calls this essential. Are his reasons enough to sway any of you?
I don't think so. They're commendable, but they don't change my vote.
Chris, you?
No, I'm sticking with non-essential. Yeah, it's a really cool episode, yeah, but I can't hit the yes button on this one.
All right. So close the chapter on that one, and moving on to the final episode that we're going to discuss on this first part of our season 3 wrap up, and that would be the Empath. Craig Cohen.
Aliens decree death for Captain Kirk, Mr. Spock, and Dr. McCoy in a bizarre experiment in which humans are used as guinea pigs in the Empath on NBC television network Star Trek, Friday, December 6th.
You know, I felt really bad giving this episode a non-essential vote, and that was because Mark Cushman really seems to like this episode a lot.
Yeah,
I felt like I let him down by giving this a non-essential.
I agree with you there, Jeff, but I still stand by my vote. I think as a work of art, the episode is very, very successful. It's moving at points. It does everything a work of art should do, but that doesn't mean that it's essential in terms of what we set out to do with this series.
I agree, and that's why I had to go non-essential. The Vions don't recur again in any Star Trek series or episodes anywhere. The funny thing, they do get mentioned again in Turnabout Intruder later on, which is cool. No new tech, character moments. There's a few, but nothing that we haven't seen before or won't see again. So by our criteria of what would make an episode essential, this one doesn't make the cut. Chris, how do you feel about the Empath?
Non-essential, pretty much for all the reasons Craig stated. Yeah, I think it looks nice, but that's not gonna deem it essential. And the story too, this is one of those episodes I really have to be in the mood to watch too. Sometimes when it comes on, if I'm doing a run through, it's like, oh boy. Other times I can get through it, but it just really doesn't do much for me.
So Matt disagrees once again. Matt calls this episode essential. He understands why people have problems with it. He says, I myself don't know why the Vions have to put the big three through such torture to see that if Jem's people are worth saving. At the end of the story, they hint that they will rescue Jem's planet, but does this mean the other one they're considering saving is now doomed? So it's a shame for those poor people. What sets this episode apart is the relationship between the big three and the way they compete to sacrifice themselves for each other. That's a really good point. I love the scene where Jem senses the love in Spock. I also love the scene where Kirk is running toward the Vions and they slow him down. Apparently, this was DeForest Kelly's favorite episode. So that there was one really good note in there, and that was the big three characters, Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, competing to sacrifice themselves for each other. I think that's a really good thing to focus on, because a lot of people will cite the trinity of characters as one of the strongest parts of the original series. What do you guys think about that?
Very, very great point there by Matt.
Chris, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I totally forgot about that part. That's probably my favorite part of the episode too. That was well done, and yeah, I agree.
And of course, stylistically, this episode is very unique. It's like a stage show put on film. And this is one of those episodes that reading about it in Mark Cushman's These Are the Voyages book kind of opened my eyes and made me appreciate the episode more from a stylistic and a production standpoint. So another one of those things we highly recommend Mark's books for. If you're a Star Trek fan, you can't go wrong picking those books up. You'll learn so much about these episodes, and it'll probably help to change your mind about some of the ones you thought were really bad. You guys agree with that, right, Craig?
Oh, yeah.
Definitely. So that about wraps it up for the first half of our season 3 wrap up. Either of you guys have any thoughts on the first half of the third season? Anything to lead us out?
I got to say that I was surprised that some of these episodes fell in the third season, because they really felt like we talked about them a long time ago. And I guess, with 24 episodes in the season, 24, 23, 22, 20 weeks ago is a long time, I guess, in the grand scheme of our show. But still, I was surprised in this first half that we had some really strong episodes that, as we talked about, would fit nicely in with the best of the series.
Chris, any final thoughts on the first half of season 3?
Yeah, it's a pretty decent first half. I mean, you have one big bomb and the children shall lead, but other than that, it's pretty solid. I mean, it's not the first or second season, but it's still pretty good.
All right, excellent thoughts from both of you. So we will be back next Sunday with the conclusion to our season 3 wrap up. So tune in. And if you have any comments that you wish to share on anything from Elan of Troyes through Turnabout Intruder, feel free to let us know on our Facebook page. We'll be more than happy to include your comments in that episode, like we do for Matt's. And another big thank you to Matt for sending this great detailed email here with your perspectives on all of these episodes. Really nice to have a fourth person weighing in on some of these and giving us different perspectives. So catch up with us next Sunday on the Tricorder Transmissions. Meanwhile, you can catch up with us on Facebook at facebook.com/the Tricorder Transmissions, on Twitter at TTT_pod, or our website, thetricordertransmissions.com.
Yeah, and Jeff, I think we have at least another 3 minutes we can talk.
Sure.
I know we didn't get to do a proper intro this week, but I think it's worth mentioning that as we're recording this episode, a really interesting Kickstarter project has launched that I think a lot of people that listen to our show will probably be interested in. And that is the Adam Nimoy documentary, For the Love of Spock.
Yes, I did see that. Nice.
A documentary about Leonard. his dad, and it's over on Kickstarter. And I gotta say that they have some really interesting rewards, especially if you've got some deep pockets. They are really clearing things out of the Nimoy archives to get this documentary funded. Things that involve autographs from cast members that are no longer with us, that are from Leonard's personal collection. And also at the $15 level, it's really interesting. It's called the Enterprise Travelogue. And it says, in addition to our exclusive updates throughout our mission together, we'll send you a one-of-a-kind digital PDF bundle of Spock collectibles, including historic magazine articles, home photography, and rare interviews with Leonard and the Nimoy family.
Wow.
That sounds like a tremendous little bundle that you would get there, and that is something that I am very interested in.
Very cool. Very cool. So we'll track the progress of this Kickstarter.
It's
called. The next few episodes.
Yeah, it's called For the Love of Spock, and there's a really good write-up by Adam, spelling out what they need the money for. And I think any good Kickstarter project really tells you what they plan to do with the money, and it doesn't seem like this is being done for any other reason than to really honor Leonard Nimoy.
Excellent. Sounds really, really cool. So we'll put a link to that in the show notes, and we'll follow the progress through our next few episodes as the Kickstarter progresses. I think this is one of those ones that's going to get funded very easily.
Yeah, I mean, right now I think they've only been up for a day. They've already got almost 800 backers and are almost at $55,000. So
what's the total?
600,000.
Oh, okay. So that's pretty good progress.
Yeah, they got 27 days to go, and word will continue to spread. But I mean, William Shatner tweeted this, and I'm sure it won't be the last time he tweets it.
Agreed. So, and I'm sure this is going to be getting picked up by a lot of the different Trek blogs and fan sites and other podcasts too. So I would expect this thing to get funded pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So, all right. So we'll see you guys next week, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Chris Ritzer. All right. Excellent. So thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll see you next Sunday.